The terrifying truth about Stonehenge isn't that we don't know who built it. The terrifying truth is that we now do. Archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson dedicated his career to one idea, that Stonehenge was a place for the dead. Not just a burial ground, but a spirit realm built of stone. He revealed a lost world with a city of the living and a city of the dead linked by a sacred river. The rituals that took place there, the feasts, the journeys, they paint a picture of a civilization whose beliefs were far more extreme than we ever knew. A new way of seeing. Stonehenge. For 5,000 years, the name has echoed with mystery. Giant stones weighing up to 40 tons, arranged in a perfect circle on a lonely plain in England. Who built it? How did they move these colossal rocks? And why? For centuries, the answers were lost to time, replaced by tales of Merlin the Wizard, pagan druids, or even visitors from another world. Many people are crazy about these theories. But the thing nobody tells you is that for decades, archaeologists were so focused on the monument itself, they were missing the entire picture. They were staring at a single tree and ignoring the forest. That all changed with one man, Mike Parker Pearson, an archaeologist who had the radical idea to turn his back on Stonehenge and start digging in the fields and riverbanks around it. You see, Pearson wasn't just another historian obsessed with the stones. He was a student of people. He had spent years in Madagascar studying their unique relationship with ancestors. There he saw societies that built elaborate stone tombs for the dead, while they themselves lived in simple wooden homes. To them, stone was eternal. For the ancestors, wood was temporary for the living. This idea sparked a revelation in his mind. What if Stonehenge wasn't a standalone mystery? What if it was just one part of a much larger sacred landscape? A landscape divided between the world of the living and the world of the dead. It was a wild theory, and to put it mildly, the academic world was skeptical. The consensus was that the people who built Stonehenge were transient nomads, leaving no trace of their lives behind. But Pearson was convinced they were wrong. He launched one of the biggest archaeological investigations in British history, the Stonehenge Riverside Project. For nearly a decade, he and his team scoured the landscape. They weren't just looking for artifacts, they were looking for a lost world. He believed that if Stonehenge was the stone domain of the dead, there had to be a corresponding wooden domain of the living somewhere nearby. A place where thousands of builders and worshippers lived, feasted, and celebrated. He zeroed in on a location about 2 miles northeast, a large henge enclosure known as Durrington Walls, right on the banks of the river Avon. What many overlooked is that while Stonehenge was aligned with the midwinter sunset, Durrington Walls was aligned with the midwinter sunrise. It was a clue that couldn't be a coincidence. His team started digging at Durrington Walls in 2004. What they found was beyond their wildest dreams. It wasn't just a few scattered huts. Buried beneath the earth were the floors of hundreds, possibly over 1,000 small wooden houses. The sheer number of discoveries was staggering. Countless animal bones, pottery shards, and stone tools. This was it. This was the Lost Village, a prehistoric metropolis that had been hidden in plain sight for millennia. It was the largest Neolithic settlement ever found in Britain, a bustling hub of activity where the builders of Stonehenge lived. Pearson had found the land of the living, and its existence completely changed the story of Stonehenge, turning a lonely monument into the centerpiece of a sprawling ritual kingdom. The first piece of a terrifying truth was now in his hands. But how were these two places, the stone world of the dead and the wooden world of the living, truly connected? Life and afterlife. The discovery of the massive settlement at Durrington Walls was a game changer, but for Mike Parker Pearson, it was just the beginning. Finding the village of the living was one thing. Proving its direct link to the supposed kingdom of the dead at Stonehenge was another. The key, he believed, was the snaking waterway that flowed between them. the River Avon. In ancient cultures, rivers were often seen as cosmic boundaries, pathways that separated the physical world from the spirit world. Pearson theorized that the River Avon wasn't just a source of water, it was a ceremonial highway, a river Styx for the Neolithic people of Britain. He imagined huge processions of people traveling from the land of the living to the land of the dead to honor their ancestors. To prove it, his team followed the river, and that's when they made another jaw-dropping discovery. Right at the end of a ceremonial avenue leading from the river towards Stonehenge, they found evidence of yet another stone circle, which they named Blue Stonehenge. It had been dismantled thousands of years ago, but the empty holes for the stones remained. These weren't the giant sarsen stones of the main monument. They were the smaller blue stones, the same type found in the inner circle of Stonehenge. The thing is, this lost circle was positioned at what would have been the starting point of the final leg of a spiritual journey. A procession would begin at Durrington Walls, travel down to the River Avon, and then float downstream. When they disembarked, they would arrive at Blue Stonehenge, a kind of spiritual gateway before proceeding up the Grand Avenue to Stonehenge itself. This find was huge. It physically connected the river to Stonehenge and solidified the idea of a ceremonial route. The landscape was a carefully designed stage for ritual, but the connections didn't stop there. What many overlooked was the startling similarity between the layouts of Durrington Walls and Stonehenge. Pearson's team uncovered a circular timber monument at Durrington Walls known as the Southern Circle. It had the same diameter and orientation as Stonehenge. It was as if one was a mirror image of the other. The Southern Circle, built from wood that would eventually rot and disappear, was for the living. Stonehenge, built from everlasting stone, was its eternal twin for the dead. It was a stunning concept. The people of this era had built a temporary village for their brief lives and a permanent stone replica for their eternal afterlife. This duality of wood for the living and stone for the dead was the core of Pearson's terrifying truth. It revealed a belief system far more complex and rigid than ever imagined. For these people, the afterlife wasn't some vague, cloudy heaven. It was a physical, parallel reality that had to be constructed on Earth. Their entire society, their economy, their daily lives revolved around this single, all-consuming project, building a permanent home for their ancestors. The scale of this undertaking is hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about thousands of people working for generations, quarrying, transporting, and shaping stone with nothing more than rock, bone, and wood. This wasn't just a temple. It was a civilization-defining mission driven by a profound, almost fearful reverence for those who came before them. But there was one mystery that still gnawed at Pearson. The bluestones, where did they come from? The answer would reveal an even deeper, more ancient layer to this story. The stones story. The giant sarsen stones that form the main circle of Stonehenge are one wonder, but for archaeologists, the real puzzle has always been the smaller bluestones. You see, while the sarsens were quarried locally, about 20 miles away, geological analysis showed that the bluestones came from an incredible 180 miles away in the Preseli Hills of Wales. For years, the prevailing theory was that glaciers had carried these 4-ton rocks across the country during the last ice age, conveniently depositing them near Salisbury Plain for the builders to find. It was a neat explanation that required no human effort, but Mike Parker Pearson suspected the truth was far more extraordinary. He believed these stones were deliberately quarried and transported by human hands in one of the most astonishing feats of prehistoric engineering ever attempted. In 2011, his team set out to find the exact spot these stones came from. High in the rugged Preseli Hills, they found it. A series of quarry faces with clear evidence of Neolithic activity. There were wedge-shaped holes cut into the rock, stone tools left behind, and even a loading platform built to move the quarried pillars downhill. This was the smoking gun. Humans, not ice, had brought the bluestones to Stonehenge. But the discovery raised an even bigger question. Why? Why would they go to such incredible lengths to haul these specific stones across mountains, forests, and rivers? Why not just use local stones? The answer Pearson uncovered is what makes the story of Stonehenge truly mind-blowing. Digging near the Welsh quarries, his team found something that nobody expected: the remains of another, much older stone circle. The holes left in the ground perfectly matched the size and shape of the Stonehenge bluestones. Even more shocking, carbon dating showed this Welsh monument, which they named Wan Mon, was built around 3400 BC, a full 500 years before the bluestones were ever erected at Stonehenge. It appears that this wasn't just a quarry, it was the original Stonehenge. For some unknown reason, these people had decided to dismantle their sacred ancestral monument, stone by stone, and move the entire thing to a new home nearly 200 miles away. This is where the terrifying truth. The bluestones weren't just building materials, they were the physical embodiment of the ancestors themselves. These people weren't building a new monument, they were relocating their old one. It suggests a mass migration event. A tribe or nation forced to leave their ancestral homeland, literally packed up their gods and their heritage and carried them to their new settlement on Salisbury Plain. Think about the sheer willpower involved. Dragging dozens of 4-ton stones over that distance is a monumental task, even with modern technology. For a Neolithic society, it was an almost superhuman act of faith and desperation. What many overlooked is the symbolism. The people who settled at Durrington Walls weren't just building a village. They were implanting their ancient identity into a new landscape. They brought the sacred stones of their ancestors and rebuilt their spirit world first. Only then did they establish the land of the living beside it. This wasn't just construction, it was a conquest of memory, an effort to ensure their ancestral line was never broken. The journey of the bluestones transformed Stonehenge from a local temple into the final destination of an epic migration, a story of survival and cultural preservation written in stone. But what exactly happened when they gathered at these sites? The bones left behind would tell a story of rituals far stranger than anyone imagined. The Great Feast of the Dead. With the discovery of Durrington Walls and the origin of the bluestones, Mike Parker Pearson had pieced together the what and where of Stonehenge. But the most unsettling question remained: what actually happened there? What were these rituals that connected the living to the dead? The answer was buried in the trash heaps of the ancient village, specifically in tens of thousands of animal bones. The sheer volume of bones was the first shock. Analysis revealed they belonged to around 9,000 pigs and cattle. But the thing nobody tells you is how these animals were prepared. They weren't just random scraps from daily meals. The bones showed that these were overwhelmingly young pigs, fattened up and brought from all across Britain, from as far as Scotland and Wales. This was evidence of massive coordinated feasts. People were traveling hundreds of miles, bringing their best livestock with them for enormous gatherings centered around the winter and summer solstices. This wasn't a small local ceremony, it was the prehistoric equivalent of a national festival. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of people descended on Durrington Walls for these events. They would have erected a bustling city of wooden houses, feasted on an industrial scale, and then as the sun set on the shortest day of the year, they would begin the procession. They would journey down to the river Avon and make their way to Stonehenge to commune with the spirits of the dead. It was a pilgrimage of thousands, a spectacle of fire, food, and faith. But here's where it gets terrifying. The analysis of the pig bones at Durrington Walls revealed something peculiar. Most of the butchering was done carelessly, and large parts of the carcasses were discarded with plenty of meat still on them. This suggests wasteful, almost frantic consumption. This wasn't about sustenance. It was about extravagant celebration, a party on a scale so big that finishing the food wasn't the point. It was a ritual of excess. Even more telling, there was a stark lack of animal bones found at Stonehenge itself. It seems the wild feasts happened in the land of the living, while the land of the dead remained a place of solemn, quiet reverence. The living partied while the spirits watched on in their eternal stone home. The human remains found at Stonehenge tell an even darker story. For years, archaeologists had found pockets of cremated bones buried in holes around the monument, but no one was sure of their significance. Pearson's project was the first to systematically analyze them. They found the remains of at least 63 individuals, men, women, and children. Radiocarbon dating showed these burials took place over 500 years, starting around 3000 BC. What this means is that Stonehenge was, from its very beginning, a cemetery, not just a temple, but a consecrated burial ground for what appears to be a ruling elite or a single powerful dynasty. These weren't the builders, they were the sacred ancestors for whom the entire monument was constructed. To put it mildly, this changes everything. Stonehenge was not a place for everyone. It was an exclusive mausoleum for the chosen few. Their ashes were interred in the ground, their spirits housed in the everlasting stones, while their descendants gathered miles away to feast in their honor. The terrifying truth is the sheer social pressure and control this system implies. An entire society mobilized for centuries to serve the memory of a handful of elite ancestors. But if this society was so powerful and unified, why did it all end? The stones fell silent for a reason. A monument abandoned. For 1,000 years, the society that built Stonehenge thrived. They moved mountains, engineered stone circles, and hosted festivals for thousands of people from every corner of Britain. Their world was built on a powerful, unifying idea, the eternal bond between the living and the ancestral dead represented by wood and stone. They were, by all accounts, the dominant cultural force on the island. And then around 2500 BC, it just stopped. The grand feasts at Durrington Walls ceased. The final construction phases at Stonehenge were left unfinished. The great monument, which had been the center of their universe for a millennium, was abandoned. The question that has haunted archaeologists for centuries is why? What could possibly cause such a powerful civilization to walk away from its life's work? Mike Parker Pearson believes the answer lies not in a war or a plague, but in a profound cultural and technological revolution that swept across Europe, the arrival of the Bronze Age. The thing is, the society that built Stonehenge was a Stone Age society. Their power was communal. Building something like Stonehenge required thousands of people working together, united by a shared belief system that emphasized the collective and the ancestors. Individual identity was secondary to the lineage and the tribe. But the introduction of bronze changed everything. Bronze wasn't just a new material for tools and weapons, it was a source of individual power and prestige. You see, creating bronze required control over rare resources, tin and copper, and specialized knowledge. Suddenly, individuals could accumulate wealth and status in a way that was impossible before. A new kind of hero emerged, the warrior, the chieftain, the individual. This shift is visible in the archaeological record. The era of massive communal monuments like Stonehenge and Durrington Walls gives way to a new era of individual burials. Grand tombs known as round barrows begin to appear all over the landscape, each containing a single powerful figure buried with bronze daggers, gold ornaments, and other symbols of personal wealth. The most famous of these is the Amesbury Archer, a man buried near Stonehenge with some of the earliest bronze and gold artifacts ever found in Britain. This was a seismic shift in belief. The focus moved away from the collective ancestors and onto the individual. The afterlife was no longer a communal stone paradise for the dynasty, but a personal journey for the powerful. To put it mildly, the old gods of stone and ancestry were being replaced by new gods of metal and individualism. And in this new world, a project like Stonehenge, which demanded the labor of thousands for the sake of long-dead ancestors, no longer made sense. The social glue that held the society together had dissolved. The great feasts, the pilgrimages, the centuries of construction, it all faded away as people turned to new beliefs and new ways of life. The terrifying truth that Mike Parker Pearson uncovered isn't just that Stonehenge was a place for the dead. It's that the belief system behind it was far more fragile than anyone imagined. For nearly 1,000 years, it stood at the center of a great spiritual order, a world where the living and the dead were connected by ritual and stone. And then suddenly it ended. Not with war, not with fire, but with silence. A quiet collapse of meaning. The stones were left behind, their purpose fading as generations forgot the language that once bound them. Stonehenge wasn't conquered, it was abandoned to time, left standing as a monument to a vanished faith. Today it looms as a haunting reminder that no matter how strong a civilization may seem, belief itself can wither away. What once defined an age can become irrelevant overnight, replaced by new gods, new rules, and new dreams. The people who built Stonehenge didn't vanish, but their world did. Their ceremonies, their symbols, their sense of order, all swallowed by change. And that's the part that chills us most, because Stonehenge isn't just a mystery of the past, it's a mirror. It whispers to us about the fragility of our own systems, our own truths, our own monuments. One day what we believe unshakable might stand in ruins too, silent and cold, while a future world struggles to remember what it once meant. So the terrifying truth is that Stonehenge was a cemetery built by a society that eventually chose the individual over the collective. Does that cycle sound familiar? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.